Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good opportunity to network, and we certainly enjoyed that last panel presentation, speaking for everyone, of course, but great content. Our plan this panel session to do is technical issues. One moment, please. It's fun operating a couple systems at once, so thanks for everyone's patience. But let's take you back to about March 13th. The Prime Minister's making announcements telling not only is it time to come home, borders are closed, very little warning, trying to rapidly bring people back home, trying to help them, trying to continue work with individuals who are under the care of some of our organizations around the world. Needless to say, challenging times. What we're going to talk about in this panel discussion is how to communicate with those clients in a crisis, hopefully in a way that you don't get completely overwhelmed and you're able to manage them when it's needed the most, but also the technologies that are there to help us do that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Elliot Draga, who works for Nordic Insurance Software. As one previous president of THIA described to me, I believe it was Alex Bittner, one of the bright young stars in our industry who's really giving of his time, who cares, and who's, I think, gonna lead this panel quite well. Elliot, take it away.
Thanks very much, Will. Appreciate those words. And thanks again for being the MC throughout this. Sterling job as always. Quick thanks to the sponsors as well. Obviously the industry is, we're all going through this together, and I think it says a lot about our industry members and the THIA members to step up and support an event like this and support our association when we need it the most. And just a quick thanks to Tony as well for leading the technology committee and helping us to select this hop-in tool. I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to do the networking earlier today. It was fantastic. I encourage you to log on after this session and continue on with it. It was really great. A few notes before we get started. Obviously, you know, we would have preferred to do this in person, but we're doing a virtual session, and technical difficulties, as we just saw, can come up. So if anybody drops off, just have patience throughout that. And also, as I'm doing this from home, I have a dog and he may bark at some point in time. So just have patience in the event that happens. So without further ado, I want to get into it. This is a super interesting panel discussion. And I have four very, very knowledgeable panelists that are going to speak to a variety of different topics today. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and to start off by answering a very relevant question to the panel topic of today. So we'll start with Renaud Millian, who is a CEO at Spixie. Renaud, if you don't mind, just introduce yourself and Spixie and tell us how COVID-19 has impacted the way that you communicate with your customers, or perhaps by extension, how your customers are communicating with their customers.
Thanks, Elliot. Thank you very much for the invite. A pleasure to be here. Good morning, everyone. I'm talking to you from Zurich today. And so Spixie, it's a conversational process automation platform. We exist now since 5 years, based in London and in Zurich. We help insurance companies mainly and brokers as well to automate their customer-facing processes, from quote and buy, from basically getting a quote, getting a price, and even binding a policy administration for change of address, and also claims, starting with the first notice of loss and then straight through processing, especially for simple claims. COVID-19 was very special this year in the sense that some of the large insurers could really see it coming, especially in February, the one with the operation in China and Asia. And they really saw that they had to prevent their call centers and their operation to be a bit more resilient. And some of them kind of called us in order to deploy really quickly some digital interface on their website. And one of the key in terms of communication with our clients was to be able to say, we are here, we can deploy something really quick to help your operations. So that was kind of the first type of communication. And then once COVID came and then like the huge numbers started to spike across the world, a different type of communication came in, which was more about telling them, but like really understanding what they were going through, which can be working remotely, setting them some new IT infrastructure, up to starting to see what type of priorities they were giving. So sometimes they might even cut on the innovation in digital on the short term, say, please bear with us, but then in 6 months it might come again. But on the short term, they might need something else. And I guess through the panel discussion today, we will touch upon this type of various processes.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, going to be a recurring theme throughout today. Next up, on my screen at least, is Adam St. John, who's the CEO at Citata. Adam, if you don't mind introducing yourself and Citata, and yeah, answering the same question. How has COVID-19 impacted the way that you and your customers are communicating?
Sure. Thank you, Elliot. So hi, everyone. My name is Adam, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Citata. Citata is a technology and risk intelligence company that's spun out of the world's first digital disease detection platform, so pretty relevant, and that was also created here in Canada. We automatically detect threats and travel disruptions and notify travelers on the ground. We were one of the first to bring these types of services en masse to the leisure travel sector through a partnership with Travel Insured in the United States, which was about 3 years ago. And we also maintain improved assistance technologies, including telemedicine as well. So COVID has certainly expanded our service offerings. It hasn't necessarily changed the way we communicate, but it's definitely increased the frequency. But I would say for our partners, things have changed quite dramatically. With us, we detected COVID in the middle of December and published our first warning on January 2nd. So that meant, by extension, our partners like Travel Insured and their TPAs also had a pretty good heads up in what was to come and sort of all throughout the journey. So they were able to get a bit of head start in preparing and also communicating to their plan holders, to their policy holders. And I would also say that many of our new partners have also realized that information about the travel journey is now critical to lowering anxieties and improving confidence. So overall, we've seen an increased demand for these types of intelligence services that can give travelers more information.
Again, I think going to be a very recurring theme throughout today's panel discussion. Next up, we've got Matt Pearson. Matt's a partner at Ernst & Young and a colleague of our keynote speaker earlier today. And Matt focuses specifically on the technology sector. So Matt, I'll toss it to you to elaborate on that and again, answer this same initial question. What's COVID-19 done to the way that you're communicating with your customers?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And hello, everybody. Again, my name is Matt Pearson, and I lead the IT and the financial services sector for what we call our business incentives practice at Ernst & Young. So in that role at EY, I help a lot of our insurance and our banking clients develop strategies for digital transformation, and more specifically, how to help fund that investment and offset some of the technology risks that are involved with making those kind of commitments. So COVID, I wouldn't say has dramatically changed the way that we do our business, but looking at our clients, if anything, COVID has probably accelerated that focus on digital. And we see about 80% of our insurance clients investing heavily in digital solutions to either engage with customers or generate new revenues or cost controls or launch new products. And more than 50% of those consider digital to be their top priority. So it's obviously a big focus. For a lot of travelers, rebuilding that confidence in travel and travel insurance is dependent on having a seamless, self-directed digital experience to simplify that whole process of how coverage is sold and administered, and the technology tools that go into that are such an integral part of that whole process that that's the reason, obviously, why we're talking about it here today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And last up, I want to introduce Emmanuel Scansani. He's the Director of Partnerships and Strategic Relations at Riskline. Emmanuel, if you don't mind doing a quick intro and yeah, answering the same question here.
Hi, Elliot. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Director of Partnerships at Riskline. I am based in Barcelona. We are a travel risk intelligence company. So what we do is monitoring events and incidents, of course, also COVID stuff since January, and then reporting this through APIs and portals to our customers who are in many different sectors and industries. I would say a special aspect that is a peculiarity of Riskline is the fact that we have a team of human analysts who are monitoring all the intelligence we create. So while we are on the constant process of monitoring media outlets and social media and being on the lookout for what is happening, there is always a team of professional open source intelligence analysts who are reviewing and producing the intelligence that we pass on to our partners. Now, in terms of COVID-19, I think the main impact has been a greater demand for information. And I would say whoever has had the opportunity of relying on Riskline's intelligence had the chance of being able to predict what would happen eventually. Our first report for what was going on in Wuhan was written on January 1st. And this, was the first of a series of many reports that were illustrating what was happening. And these happened weeks before the WHO or national governments were able to do anything. The other aspect, we have obviously been able to help companies, preparing for lockdowns and planning, for a loss of operational and business continuity. And I would say third, that our intelligence has also made possible for many assistance companies to organize repatriation flights, for example.
Great. I think the general trend and theme in a lot of those responses is just that there seems to be a ton of uncertainty. And thankfully, all the panelists here are working for companies that are enabled to maybe accelerate the flow of information to general consumers. And I think that's where I want to start here. If the solution to this sort of uncertainty is information, Adam, I'm gonna come to you first. How do we actually filter through this abundance of information and figure out what's relevant and what's the quote unquote fake news that we're hearing?
I think that's where companies like Citada and Riskline really prove their value. I think both companies have their own software systems at play to do a lot of the automatic detection of these types of events. And organizations like ours and WorldAware and so on have analysts behind the scenes that are doing the human check to make sure it's relevant, still topical for the particular audience that they're going after, and also not fake news. So it does come down to the ability of finding the signal from the noise, if you will, being able to scan hundreds and thousands of different data points at any given time, and then creating something relevant out of a whole bunch of noise.
And is there, we heard in the previous panel discussion, all of the different hurdles that we're going to have to go through as an industry in order to prepare consumers for the eventual resumption of travel. Is part of this an obligation on insurers to help to filter through all of the noise and to take a lot of the information that's out there about the potential risks in different markets and present that to their consumers?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I would use the term obligation. I think it would be wise to do so. I think it would be very important for anyone to try and help their customers understand what they're going through. There's a really good quote by a professor of psychology from Quebec, and he basically says that our anxieties are tied to our inability to understand what's happening. But if we want to lower those anxieties, then we need to inform people about what's in store for them. So it's always connected to the unknown. If we can make the unknown known, then we're reducing anxieties. And I think travel insurers should certainly consider this concept of informing people if they want to maintain relevancy in sort of this new world of travel that consumers are going through.
Emmanuel, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, providing a very similar solution.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Adam that it's maybe not really an obligation in a literal sense. It's more like maybe a moral obligation, I would say. Definitely, there has been a full loss of confidence in traveling. People are afraid of traveling, or whether it's too complex. And like he said, it's the unknown. It's not knowing what will happen, what could happen. Being unable also to assess the risk, whether it's enough, for me to take the risk of taking a plane to Berlin or not. So I guess informing the traveler, in a sense, is a moral duty, because informing him means that the traveler will feel in a condition where he knows what is happening or what could happen. So he's also able to measure whether he's willing to travel, for example.
And I think, the majority way that a lot of us are consuming this information is digitally. And Matt, you touched on it in your opening there. Digitization is an inevitability in the future of insurance and in the future of travel and travel insurance. But I think sometimes they get labeled as sort of the catch-all solution, right? Everything will be better as long as we just go digital and go to the cloud. What forms of digitalization do you think that industry partners should be looking at as an immediate, must-have?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to think of it is that, during COVID and post-COVID, travel insurance is effectively mandatory at this point. And that means that consumers are going to be looking less and less at, if they should be buying travel insurance, and more looking at who makes that process less onerous, more data-driven, more self-directed, and just generally more convenient. So a lot of the technologies that we're talking about that are probably let's call it some of the low-hanging fruits to bring in some of these customers are very well-known technologies like chatbots, connected with mobile apps, being able to just improve customer service through that way of looking at things. But what makes that whole process less onerous and more attractive to customers is when it really goes a level beyond that and starts getting into things like using artificial intelligence and using machine learning to try to understand, sentiment analysis is now a big focus in chatbots, for example. So, being able to evaluate a customer's anxiety level or frustration level while they're applying for coverage is something that can actually be done now just by the way people enter their responses, the way that people react with chatbots. And that kind of technology is out there now, and it's available to some. And that kind of thing has really been, it's really proven to be effective. And once you've got that kind of interaction with a customer, you're also able to gain a lot of insights on just historical data and decision making, and that has allowed people to use the same type of technology to also present personalized service offerings or upselling, if you will, during that whole process.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because I think the sort of multi-channel solution is going to be something that's very much needed and in demand as we recover from this. But I want to turn to Renaud quickly, obviously, talking about chatbots. It's right in your area of expertise. Can you just elaborate a little bit? I mean, we all go on websites and have a little thing pop up in the bottom corner. There's obviously a lot more to it than that. And I know Matt just touched on sentiment analysis, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what the underlying technologies can be used for above and beyond just, the pop-up when you log into a website.
Yeah, sure. And it's a really good question. And to to complete some of the words that Matt has just been using in the previous answer, chatbots are clearly making a kind of a dent and becoming like kind of a support channel. But why? Historically speaking, most of the insurer interacting with their customer or prospects at the beginning using just like phone. And it was simply great because human-to-human conversations is where we explain complex product or processes, which might be the case with insurance. So trust is created, but as we all know, it's not really scalable. We can't just buy new office, hire people, train them, especially now with kind of the restriction of social distancing or working remotely, and this type of technology might just not work. Plus, analog conversations, it's just really hard to extract data, to structure it, and to make it actionable. So on the other side, we saw a lot of apparition of web forms, which can be like digital, but as you know, it's not a conversation anymore. It's kind of a dry monologue where people are just inputting information really quick, but they might still have questions and end up coding, and that's the issue before. So they lack the conversational aspect. So how do we mix and keep this conversational from call center, making it digital? It's basically chatbot in the middle. So I'm not saying we should get rid of web form and call centers, not at all, but to offer a search channel, which is basically now what people are using more and more from home, going online. And as they work maybe longer hours, they might want to access services after working hours. Call centers might be closed and web form not providing enough information. So what we see usually on the bottom right of websites are not necessarily chatbot, but it could be web live chat, which are simply an extension of call centers, where it's a human-to-human conversation just through a chat. The constraint is, as a human, I can't handle more than 4 conversations at the same time. It's what you might feel if you're on WhatsApp. It's just a killer for the brain. So the real chatbots are here to basically achieve a specific goal and to maximize the underlying process to reach the goal. And what are the processes for the insurance industry that are customer facing? They are in the value chain of the insurance product on the distribution. So basically getting information from the customer, getting some idea of where type of product can match, up to integrating to the rating engine, retrieving some of the prices. And we did one example with post office on travel insurance back in 2017 or 2018. And people could buy, a family could buy a travel policy up to 8 different family members with all pre-existing medical conditions and add like different countries to their policy. It was really complex, and usually selling an insurance product like this one over the phone might take 40-45 minutes. So the cost is really, really high. We could do it through a fully vertical integrated chatbot. Other processes can be the change of address, as I mentioned before, adding someone else on the policy, some other changes on policy, and claims, of course. And in the case of travel, claims could be triggered through alerts, which can be linked straight to the flight trackers, could be linked straight to other alerts that can be also made by the other panelists from on the alerts that can be triggered by events. So these are like the proper processes, because usually when we see a lot of horizontal chatbot that focus on frequently asked questions, they are not executing any process. They are just scrapping the website, telling to the customer, if you want this information, just go there, still on the website. So as a customer, as a user, I feel a bit disappointed or deceived because I'm not getting what I want. I'm just going somewhere else on the website. So the importance here, it should be really process driven from an insurance perspective, yet from the interaction to make it friendly for the end user.
Yeah, we just had a question in the poll, and it seems like the overwhelming majority of people would be happy to use chatbot technology to help to alleviate a lot of the surpluses in demand that I'm sure a lot of companies experienced in the immediate aftermath, the end of March and beginning of April. But cost is a big factor right now. With people not traveling and premium dollars not being sold, the costs can be prohibitive. And Matt, I want to turn back to you. Obviously, this is what you're focused on at E&Y. Are there alternatives? Are there government grants that are available? Are there alternatives for people to look at financing, digital investments outside of just, partnering with companies and paying a bill?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize it, especially in the financial services sector, but the R&D tax credit, for example, in Canada is one of the most generous programs in the world. And it's designed specifically to help offset the financial risks of investing in new or risky technologies. So that's a big one, and that's a program that people have access to annually. It's not a one-off application. It's something that companies can apply for every year, and it's timed with their corporate tax return. So it's a very predictable process, and that's something that certainly can help offset some of the risks. There's other similar programs like IRAP that has a similar focus on helping to offset some of the technology risks. And these days, there's also even some specific COVID-related programs that have been created more as a short-term fix to help clients get over hurdles, but at the same time, they do lend, there's opportunities there to capture some short-term financing that will help fund some of these longer-term projects.
Yeah, and I guess part of the government financing process is maybe going it alone, or looking at grants that are going to help to support companies to do the work themselves. But as one of the other poll questions related to specifically on chatbots, but I'm sure across the board from an IT perspective, they may not know where to start, and maybe partnering with companies who already have a proven product is another viable alternative. I just want to touch on that a little bit. Have you seen at E&Y if there's been an uptick in those sort of partnerships, whether it's with insurtechs or existing tech firms in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. And just to dispel one of the rumors, maybe that partnering with a third party to co-develop a solution, or even to use an existing solution from a third-party vendor does not make it ineligible for a lot of these programs. So there's still funding available even in situations like that. So that's a key consideration. But I'd say for sure we had about 50%, I'd say, of our clients were engaged with external startups or insurtechs to help develop their digital strategy before COVID. And I'd say it's probably well over 80% now. So there has been a real shift towards that outsourcing model of moving more towards startups. And, part of it's obviously a higher risk that, you're working with a startup that may or may not be well funded in a time like this. So there's obviously more risks involved, but those startups are also arguably more innovative and typically more nimble. They can do a lot more than some of the large, laden down IT departments in a very large firm. So it is attractive, and it is something we see more of. Having said that, the actual spending in that space, I would say, is not nearly as dramatic as the number of people that are talking about it and investigating it and looking at how to do it. That's still lagging. So it means there is still a really good opportunity for people to differentiate by going that route.
Yeah, and I would argue, just by extension of that, and following with the theme of the day, which is that these are unprecedented times and something that the industry hasn't experienced before. Now might be the right time to look at external perspectives. Now might be the right time to look at a diverse set of opinions, because I don't think that the norm is necessarily what's going to get companies out of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, and just digitizing the process that you already have is not really the solution here. That this is an opportunity to really go, be bold and be innovative and go after something that is going to make your service offering more attractive post-COVID. That's the opportunity that we have right now.
I tend to agree with that. Every company is digitizing, starting with distribution, following through to claims. but that means at some point everyone will be a digital based company. So the next question is, well, what are you going to do that makes you stand out from the crowd again?
There's a lot of chatter right now in the panel discussion chat. And before I get to the topic that a lot of people are talking about, there was one point that was brought up, just asking whether or not there's a certain loss of confidence and anxiety due to all of the different disparate, pieces of information, and getting back to that sort of fake news point that we talked about earlier. And I just want to go back to Adam Emanuel on that, because I think it's really important. I personally believe, and I think a lot of us here can agree to the fact that getting verifiable information in order to make defendable decisions, I think is extremely important for consumers and rebuilding consumer confidence. And I just wonder if either one of you wants to elaborate on that a little bit and help to build on what we can do to filter out, or what you guys are doing to filter out this sort of fake news. What companies, what insurers can do to also filter out and provide verifiable information that travelers can make decisions on, to help support whether or not they want to buy that policy and fly somewhere in the future.
Well, I think travel information needs to be deployed quickly in real time or almost, but that's not enough, obviously, because obviously that's not a guarantee that you will not fall victim of fake news. And definitely I agree that fake news are strengthening the sense of anxiety, because I would say many of the fake news out there are specifically meant to fuel anxiety and uncertainty and spread in a sense chaos. So what we can do is being able to analyze information, knowing where a fake news starts, identifying it before it is passed over to a policyholder. I mean, so the problem is finding the right time and the right moment to intercept the fake news and not allowing the traveler to have access to it. Obviously, this is not easy. It's very difficult. It requires probably a combination of human work and machine work. And it's not something that is going to be 100% error-free. I mean, there will be cases where fake news are just so perfect that they are in fact even, repeated by very reliable media outlets. But I think the point starts with understanding, of course, banning, blacklisting those sources that are known for spreading fake news, and being able to elaborate a good list, a green list of sources that you can trust. But there should always be some thinking before believing something you read. And obviously, I would say the best will be to relying on any organization that is doing this job for you, because you will have a team of somebody expert who is looking into the information and will deliver to you a product that there is their reputation at stake, essentially.
I 100% agree. It's also a matter of sources as well, and how quick those sources can be. There's just a ton of confusion right now for consumers that need to go from point A to point B. Will I be quarantined? Do I need a COVID test? What time frame do I need it in? And often there's conflict even between government sources. So you might go to the Canadian or US embassy page, but actually, it's a couple of days slow to update compared to the destination government website, which may be in a completely different language. So there's an awful lot of confusion around this information, even when it comes to the official sources. So it does take some advanced expertise to kind of sort through it. I know both of our organizations also made an effort to capture this information and present it through a variety of ways, either through our partners or through our own websites. So for example, we have covidchecker.com that presents this information. I'm sure Riskline has a similar offering as well. And it really comes down to the ability to digest this information quickly, make sense of it, and try and make some structure around it and put it in a central place for other partners to rely on.
Do you think we'll get to a point in the future where insurers are using this type of risk information in their policy design or their pricing or rating?
I think that'd be incredibly compelling. I guess we'd have to split the information category up. I think some of this information around the entry requirements information is useful. We have started working with one partner in particular that is using our database to try and identify the low-hanging fruit in their sales opportunities. So which countries are implementing mandatory insurances for entry and so on. So that's one use case. But then you have the concept of parametric insurances as well. So you could get into a place where, I don't know, for example, if there's a terror event that happens somewhere, quickly identifying policyholders that are in the region that might be beneficiaries to that particular event, then doing something about it in some sort of automated or semi-automated way. That's very similar to sort of automatic flight delay cancellation insurance. So I could see an opportunity there for sure.
So just to bring up the point that everyone's talking about in the chat, this information, I guess you can say, is a two-way street or can be a two-way street. And obviously, anytime we're asked to provide our own personal information, there is a potential benefit, there's a potential richness to the services that companies and government can provide for us because they know more about us and they know more about our situation and can then tailor solutions for us. But I think I caught in the corner of my eye there something about Big Brother in the chat, and I just want to turn it over to each of you. And obviously we have European and Canadian panelists here, so I think we're going to get a diversity of opinions. But maybe we can just go round table and at what point do we need to focus on cybersecurity more? At what point do we need to focus on more of the back end things in order to make sure that consumers are confident in sharing their information, because there are benefits to doing so, especially in the world we live in now. So maybe Matt, I'll turn to you first on the cybersecurity piece.
Yeah, I think cybersecurity is probably one of the most important factors in all of this, because like you said, that just the way that this personal data is being aggregated and being stored, all of that becomes the responsibility of who's collecting it. And even simple things like the fact that so many people now are working from home during COVID has, we've seen a dramatic spike in phishing attempts where cybersecurity becomes a problem because people are working from home. There's a lot more opportunities for hackers to use phishing schemes to go and try to access corporate networks through employees. So there's a dramatically higher risk of that happening now with everybody working remotely. And at the same time, we're trying to dramatically ramp up the amount of data, the amount of usage data, usage-based insurance type data that we're collecting. All of that is being stored and is ripe for cyber attack. So it should be at the forefront of everybody's consideration.
I'll just turn it over to anybody else that wants to comment on that point as well.
Sure. I think certainly GDPR has put a new standard into this world, and every company needs to take the measures to make sure they adhere to GDPR, and that's a good first step. When it comes to Big Brother types of aspects, there are aspects in our system that could be interpreted as such. So in particular for corporate travelers, we do have the travel tracking capabilities where inside our app, GPS can track you, but this is fully opt-in. This sort of next level we have in our app is privacy zones. So users can set up a big black spot where they drop off the map basically. And I think when you put enough measures in place that are safeguarding people's data and privacy, then consumers are more willing to opt in to these types of services, especially if there's an extra benefit along the way. So in the case of travel insurance, knowing where someone is in an emergency can shave minutes off a emergency call, that's extremely valuable. Someone hits that help me button, we know exactly where you are and what situation you're encountering. It could potentially, save someone's life. So there are benefits, and I think as long as the benefits are made clear and companies are being very, very transparent in how they're using the data and what safeguards are in place, then I think ultimately consumers can benefit from these types of technologies as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, with digital, I mean, I guess the cyber aspect is key and goes hand in hand, in the sense that digital makes processes easier for the end user. But if it's easier, some of the prospects might want to just cheat the system, and there might be some fraudulent aspect. I remember back in 2016, our first quote and buy for travel that we did. One person wanted to buy a product, and one of the conditions is to just confirm that the person is not already traveling. And when the person typed the address when the person wanted to travel, let's say Morocco, we could see that the device from which the person was getting a quote was already in Morocco. So we could already run some fraud check in the backend to say, actually, you're not eligible and you're even lying. So it simply doesn't work. To give you, I mean, it was back in 2016. So now, 4 years later, before we go live, there's like a really critical process, which is basically responsible of generating some of the revenue of some insurance companies. We have to run some really key checks in our technology, because chatbots are basically sometimes, it could be a question with some buttons or like a calendar to click some dates, but sometimes it can be an open text for the answer. And some malicious hacker can put a piece of code in this and then hack the front end of the chatbot and then try to penetrate the systems of the insurance companies and then can access to some data. So it means that the security is at the forefront, and modularizing the interaction with the end user is really key here. And to go back to one of the points before, it was mentioned of insurance company wanting to partner with InsurTech. It's key for the agility, for the security aspect in terms of mindset. But yet, InsurTech, in order to work with large insurance companies, have also to comply with some regional, local, and national security standard. And in our case, even if we are still a young company, only 5 years old, we invested a lot of resources this year to be ISO certified in order to basically prove that not only the technology is safe, but it could be tested, and we have like a certain number of procedures to allow like the maintenance of such security, which is evolving according to various frameworks. And even within ISO, there may be like 5 or 6 different standards to just look upon and just keep being updated.
I think one of the interesting points you brought up there, Renaud, was the fact that rather than maybe asking people to forfeit more personal data, companies can look a little bit more at what they already have at their disposal, right? Yeah. So in the case where you have somebody that's trying to submit a fraudulent claim, and you're able to look at, the geotag of where they're actually located, that's information that's readily available. You're not asking anybody to provide anything above and beyond, what they might be comfortable with. And again, it's fully within, GDPR compliance. And so maybe that's something where, insurance companies and providers in our industry can look a little bit more at what they already have to work with, as opposed to running the risk of asking, customers and turning away customers for providing more personal information. We're running short on time, so I do want to address, there's one question that was brought up from the audience, and it was, with the abundance of information on entry requirements and the various different complications of traveling nowadays, and with everything changing so quickly, how can companies balance, the speed to which they are reacting to this, and maybe the accuracy in which their response is, right? In the sense that the faster that a company is reacting may not necessarily mean they're providing as accurate a solution as possible. Can anybody comment on that?
I would say that the key is how fast the information is deployed to the company. So it has to be, happening instantaneously. Then if this process instantaneously, it's up to the company making sure that the reaction they take is like done efficiently, So if it is not happening on their end, there is probably something in terms of like organization that needs to be improved, I think. But obviously they cannot rely on COVID information, on quarantine certifications, entry restrictions that they receive after a few days. It has to be something they receive immediately, I would say.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Speed and accuracy in this particular case are very much related. Obviously, we want to maximize your accuracy, but if you're not quick to track some of the updates, then your accuracy goes down because you're too slow and you haven't updated, the new entry requirements. So I think to properly address the question, I'd have to understand a bit more about the use case, but it's all I can say is it's been a tremendous challenge for a lot of organizations to stay on top of this type of information, which is why we're seeing new types of partnerships form across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the concluding point there is just the fact that it might not have been necessary previously to have these sort of channels in place to get that type of information, but it absolutely is going to be necessary today, tomorrow, and in the future of travel. And I think on that, I know we're running out of time here, so I do want to just ask one closing question to everyone. And when I initially planned to do this a few months ago, it was going to be what can companies do to prepare for phase 2, but I think we're all well beyond that point. So I'm gonna turn it a little bit differently, and we know that travel is going to eventually resume. We know that people are at some point in the future going to start to cross borders and travel once again. But we just don't know what that's going to look like. And I think, we've come to the conclusion today that communication with travelers is absolutely paramount. And I just was wondering if everybody could go around and give one recommendation of what companies can do to maybe improve their communication with their customers. And so we'll start with Renaud. If you have any sort of recommendation, a point that companies can start to look at as we prepare for the resumption of travel.
Yes, I mean, from what we've seen so far, it's the world is transforming. Companies are transforming, and the way they execute their customer-facing processes should transform as well. And creating trust with their customers through consistent communication aligned with their brand, tone of voice is key here, because what we are seeing is like customers are really shifting from one brand to the other, from one service provider to the other, and they will just go to the one to whom they have a lot of trust, and when it's easy to do business and to either buy a policy or to make a claim. So I would say, like, the piece of advice here is just to try to going back to the core processes and see how we can do it even better in a more consistent way for the end customer.
Adam, I'll turn to you next. Any recommendation for companies?
Sure, I can share a bit about how we're approaching it and how we'd like to think about it. So in particular, in the world of travel, we've been asking ourselves, well, what do travelers need to understand if they're going to go from point A to B? And that led us to be very quick in capturing the entry requirement information. So do they need insurance? Yes or no? Do they need a PCR test? Where can they get it? Will they be quarantined? And providing this kind of information on a dedicated page somewhere has resulted in a lot of our partners seeing an uplift in their customer base and building customer loyalty in that way as well. So I think certainly helping travelers understand how are they going to get from point A to point B will go a long way to building new relationships with the customer base.
Thanks. Matt, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a technology guy by background, so I'll revert to consider the cybersecurity aspect of this upfront, and we can help offset some of the investment costs that go into building these digital platforms and going through this kind of transformation. But all of that could be for naught if there's a very public breach of privacy data. And there's still a lot of apprehension about traveling and the trust that travelers put into you. If that's broken early on in this travel process, it's quite likely unrecoverable. So it's cyber cannot be an afterthought. It needs to be, it's not a bolt-on solution. It has to be a critical part in how these technologies are designed.
Emmanuel, we'll wrap up with you.
Yeah.
What recommendation can you give?
Well, my number one recommendation would be not to wait the travel resumes to take steps. Do it now. It's already too late. And then get access, wherever it is, Riskline if you like, or any other, but you need to have access to the right information. Don't just try to get it yourself here and there, patching something up. And I think the ideal thing that you want to do is getting the right information integrated into your own platform or smartphone app, and then the right information can just become a part of the product you have. And I think this will contribute to have a greater experience for the policyholder, a better way of inspiring a higher level of confidence for travel, I guess.
So I think we've just run over time here. I just want to thank all the panelists for joining today. I think Will's going to join me on screen in a second to wrap things up, but I just want to personally thank all the panelists, and maybe just conclude in saying that the way that we travel is going to change going forward, and I think as members of this industry, it's extremely important that we look at solutions of how we can help to rebuild that consumer confidence, and communication is key in that. So yeah, thanks to everyone that participated today.